Are Canadian taxpayers bankrolling the move by automaker Stellantis from Canada to the United States? The federal government handed Stellantis $15 billion of our money to grow its operation in Canada, only to see the company shift production to the United States. This post by Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre on X. Liberals gave $15 billion to Stellantis, which then announces it will invest almost exactly that same amount in the United States. Last October, the company announced it's shifting production of the Jeep Compass to Illinois. Company CEO Antonio Filoso went to the White House touting his company's investments in the United States.
It's a great day for us at Stellantis today because it's the day where we see CAFE regulation reconciled with real customers' demand. That's why at Stellantis we decided to invest to Jeep, Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler $13 billion in the next 4 years, increasing production by 50%, delivering to the market 5 new vehicles, and creating 5,000 additional jobs. That's because we believe in what you, Secretary Taffy, and all your team is doing in this country.
President Trump, meantime, says the tariffs are doing exactly what they were intended to do. He also says the current free trade agreement with Canada and Mexico could soon be over.
It expires in about a year, and we'll either let it expire or we'll maybe work out another deal with Mexico and Canada. But look, Mexico and Canada have taken advantage of the United States, like just about every other country.
Getting back to Stellantis, there was no jobs guarantee in the contract that handed the company $15 billion in tax money. The Conservatives say the same thing happened with Algoma when the Carney government gave the steelmaker a $400 million loan.
The Prime Minister promised he would negotiate a win and have a deal by July 21st. Still no win, still no deal, still no elbows. And now 1,000 workers at Algoma Steel are losing their jobs. We now learn that the Prime Minister gave $400 million to the corporate executives of that company without any job guarantees. How is it the Prime Minister could have been so incompetent?
I quote the CEO of Algoma Steel that there would be an even darker day if this government hadn't acted. Exactly. That loan, that support, saved 2/3 of those jobs. That loan, that support gives Algoma a bridge to the future that we are building strong in this country and that they voted against.
As long as the CEO is happy with the $400 million gift he got from the Prime Minister, that's all that matters to these Liberals.
This week, Algoma announced it's laying off 1/3 of its workforce in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario. Well, after first saying he would not quit as leader of the British Columbia Conservative Party, John Rustad is now doing just that. This comes after the party's board members voted to remove the leader. A statement released this week says the majority of caucus no longer has confidence in Rustad to continue on as leader. The party has named Trevor Halford, MLA for Surrey White Rock, as its interim leader. Joining me now is Franco Terrazzano, the federal director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome to the show, Franco.
Hey, thanks for having me on, Mark.
All right, we've got corporate welfare run amok, really. I mean, if you look at what Stellantis got in terms of $15 billion, and then beyond that, of course, Algoma, and both of these companies announcing layoffs, huge layoffs. And then coupled with that, you've got Stellantis going to the White House and saying, isn't it great that we're building out a huge network, auto plants here in Illinois and Michigan? I mean, what's going on here? It looks to me like the Canadian taxpayers got fleeced to the point where we're actually bankrolling Stellantis's rollout in the United States.
Well, yeah, you're right. Corporate welfare run amok, right? Like, look, you know what we need here in Canada? A no more business boondoggles law. That's what we need, because like it seems like it never ends, right? The bad news for taxpayers, where you have the federal government, at least in the case with Stellantis, with Volkswagen, with Honda, taking money from Canadian taxpayers and then giving buckets of cash to the boardrooms of multinational corporations, right? It's corporate welfare, plain and simple. Stellantis, like some of the estimates on how much taxpayer subsidies, when you look at all levels of government, I've even heard the parliamentary budget officer say it could be like $18 billion, right? Algoma Steel, this year, the federal government announces them, up to $400 million, but that's not even all of it, right? In 2021, the federal government announces $420 million for Algoma Steel. Like, this absolutely never ends. And look, like, these politicians, these government bureaucrats, they don't know how to play investment banker, right? When they're trying to spend taxpayers' money, you might as well just send them to the casino.
Apparently, they don't even know how to read a contract because apparently the Minister of Industry, Melanie Joly, did not. And why can't we have a built-in jobs guarantee with these contracts? I mean, before handing over any money, and say, look, there has to be some kind of commitment here by your company to stick it out no matter what and keep people employed. But we didn't see that in either case, either in the Stellantis case or with Algoma.
Well, no, I've even seen some media reporting that the federal government may have known about potential plans for layoffs at Algoma Steel, right? So it's almost worse than that. Look, we're seeing just a complete lack of due diligence from our politicians or government bureaucrats. Sometimes you have to wonder if they even know what's going on. But like, look, we shouldn't have corporate welfare at all, right? Because look, like, even if these jobs materialize and the federal government has a very poor track record of even keeping track of whether or not jobs materialize from corporate subsidy deals, but even if they were to materialize, like, that money that the federal government or provincial government gives to a business, that's not falling out of the sky, right? That's money that is taken out of the economy, out of the productive sector of the economy, and then handed to a select business or businesses, right? We should end corporate welfare and go on a massive tax cutting and red tape cutting campaign, right? Because look, at best, it's a shell game, right? These new jobs aren't net new jobs because that money is all being taken out of the economy in the first place.
Yeah, absolutely. And these companies, you're right, have a terrible track record. I mean, how many times have you seen this? We've got this T-shirt over and over again. Companies getting all sorts of money in the way of subsidies. You know, you always see the great photo op, and leaders, of course, love those opportunities to trumpet what a great job they are doing in terms of creating jobs. And then, poof, you get what happened with Stellantis. I mean, don't they understand that, the free market works in a way that incentivizes companies to go where the best deals are in terms of low taxation, low levels of
Yeah.
regulation. We have high taxes and high regulation in Canada. So that's going to work against any companies that want to come here. All you have to do is just look at the sheer amount of outflow in investment that's happened in Canada since the Liberals got in power. I mean, billions of dollars have
Well,
left the country.
I mean, even just look at natural resource sector, right? Since 2015, we've seen almost $670 billion of natural resource projects being stalled or canceled. $670 billion in a decade? Like, come on, folks. To get back to corporate welfare for a second, look, corporate welfare doesn't make sense, regardless of how you look at it, right? Look, first of all, why should taxpayers be subsidizing a profitable company? Well, we shouldn't be, right? But also, why should taxpayers be subsidizing a failing company? Either way, taxpayers' money should not be going for corporate welfare. But another point here, and I'm so glad you brought it up, Mark, is we are not competitive, right? And we are going to continue to see worse investment results. We're going to continue to see businesses being pushed south of the border if we continue to have an uncompetitive tax system. Look, the Tax Foundation, this international think tank, they rank tax competitiveness across other industrialized countries. Okay, on corporate tax competitiveness, Canada is 22nd out of 38 industrial countries. Awful. On income tax competitiveness, Canada is 27th out of 38. Again, awful. Mark, on both of those measures, we are behind the United States. Where do you think the money's going to go?
To the United States. And that's where it is going. Because, of course, they're also pulling back, way back on the so-called green incentives, the EV mandates. They're all going out the window in the United States. So all of a sudden, America has become a strong magnet for investment. And so it's an easy choice to make. If you're in Canada, you're struggling because of government regulation. You can't get things done. It takes forever to get decisions made. And of course, they pile on these environmental measures that make your products more costly.
Yep.
It doesn't have to be a case where, you have to be a genius to look south of the border and go, a lot of these states have much better environments where I can make real money. Why do I have to stay here any longer? And rather than making the changes that need to be made, the Liberals are doing what? They're just saying, no, let's throw more money at companies in order that they come here. It's crazy.
Or higher taxes.
Yeah.
Right? Look, the perfect proof point of this is Carney's industrial carbon tax, right? Carney's hidden carbon tax on Canadian businesses like steel companies, oil and gas companies, fertilizer plants, among others. Well, like we've already heard Carney talk about, remember, in this agreement with Alberta, right? The memorandum of understanding. After signing that agreement with the Premier Danielle Smith, he holds his own press conference and he brags about increasing his industrial carbon tax by more than 6 times, right? He bragged to reporters about that. Well, guess who doesn't impose an industrial carbon tax? The U.S. government, right? So if you're this entrepreneur, if you're this investor, well, where do you want to increase production and where do you want to cut production? In the place that is hammering you with carbon taxes, or just south of the border where they're saying, come on in, right? Set up shop here. We're not going to hammer you with carbon taxes, right? That's a perfect case proof. Canada, our federal government, continues to shove carbon taxes down our throats, while the U.S. government, regardless of who's in the White House, aren't imposing carbon taxes.
Yeah, and they love it. But it's an easy way for us to blame Trump, blame the tariffs. But there are obviously other factors involved. The outflow of money has been going on for years now, even before the tariffs came into place. And so now we have the Carney government getting roasted in the House of Commons, and to the point where they're being humiliated for handing out so much money to these companies and getting so little return. But I don't think that they can change because ideologically, these people are fixated. They don't like the idea of companies coming over here simply because they like the economic environment in the country, because they can't really take credit for it. And so that's the real problem. They only like it, economic growth to happen, it seems, when they can come out and say, look at us. We brought this company over. We gave them X number of dollars and they're going to set up shop here. If they can't take credit for something, they don't want it to happen or don't care. I think that's partially the problem here. What do you think?
Oh, it's a huge problem. Yeah. I mean, hey, they love the press conferences. Hey, gather around, bring your cameras. We're going to take out these big scissors and cut that big red ribbon, right? Like, that's what they want. But again, folks, remember, at best, this is a shell game. And it's really worse than that because these politicians, these bureaucrats, when they're spending your money, not their own, they don't have the skin in the game, right? They are thinking about the political incentives, not the economic incentives. Now, let me break down just how much this corporate welfare is costing the average Canadian. Okay, because you hear these big numbers, right? You hear that federal corporate welfare alone every year costs taxpayers $11 billion. What does that mean? It means the government is taking $1,100 from your family of 4 every year and giving your money to businesses, right? $1,100 per year for taken from a Canadian family of 4 given to businesses, right? $1,100, that would go a long way. And yet politicians are taking that money from you and handing it over to select businesses. Look, we need to have an environment where businesses can succeed, right? Based on their own merit and their ability to meet consumer demand. But that means cutting taxes, cutting red tape, cutting the out of control bureaucracy, and eliminating corporate welfare.
Absolutely. Franco Terrazzano, thank you so much for coming on the show today. How do people support your organization, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation?
Well, thank you, Mark. I'm fired up. But you can support us. You can follow us. Just head over to taxpayer.com, taxpayer.com. That's the best place that you can check out the CTF.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate
it. Thanks, Mark.
Joining me now is Wyatt Claypool. He is a worker with the OneBC Caucus. Welcome, Wyatt.
Well, thanks for having me on, Mark.
All right, your reaction to a decision by John Rustad to call it quits after saying that he would not.
Oh, I feel like I've aged like 10 years since this whole controversy started. Maybe like 5 months ago. It might have even been before that. I think obviously John was going to resign at some point. I actually thought he might try and stick it out and sue the board for saying that he was professionally incapacitated, because technically they didn't have the authority to do that, but eventually you have, too many arrows in your butt from your own people, and then you have to just kind of call it quits, or, what really is this? It was almost kind of turning into a Joe Biden situation where everyone knows he has to go. He probably knows he has to go, but he wants to leave on a more triumphant note of proving himself correct. But there was just no more capacity for him to actually buy back any of the things that he had done.
I mean, he hung on as long as he possibly could. I thought it was kind of funny that in the letter that was released to the public that the party thanked him for his services. I mean, they couldn't wait to get rid of the guy. Maybe you could fill us in. Exactly what did he do that angered the party?
The thing is that this is where different people with different agendas will kind of draw the line of where it started going wrong at different times. And this is where I think some people can be dishonest about it. A lot of the problems started effectively around the election. Those who were appointed as candidates and those who were rejected, or those who were even given nominations for the BC Conservative Party, then had them taken away and given to somebody else, oftentimes an old BC Liberal MLA or somebody who at least more aligned with that party. So things were never probably going to coherently hold together from the start, because there was people from the old establishment mixed in with the new establishment of, the more uh, populist, more right wing kind of elements. And the old guard didn't seem to like that very much. And that's what led to the AGM in March of 2025, where the party just objectively rigged the whole thing in order to install, ironically, the board that eventually got rid of John Rustad himself, revoking people's memberships before it started so that they couldn't show up and vote, bussing people in order to vote for John's slate and vote through his constitution, the constitution that made it impossible in theory to get rid of him, that has led us up to this point. So, on a personal note, because I was with the BC Conservatives back then, that's where I would have drawn the line, that they just ended up creating a party that wasn't properly balanced. It was kind of like when the PC Party and the Wild Rose Party originally merged back in 2019, and or 2018, 2017. It merged before the election, but I mean, there was just too much of a PC Party influence. There's a lot of Wild Rose people around. The issue is that they tended to be more in backbench positions where the old PC types were at the front. That's still, even to this day, now with Trevor Halford as the interim BC Conservative leader, is that you have a heavy slant towards the BC Liberal, BC United side of the party in executive positions, in leadership positions. And so I think John Rustad was always more of a symptom of a party that didn't know what it wanted to be, and I'm not sure if they know what they want to be yet. And I think that's what the leadership race will end up taking care of.
So where do they go from here? I mean, the party came really close to winning the last election. And so with him gone, where does it go from here?
It depends, again, what the members want to do. The thing is that the fundraising, and again, this is actually where a lot of people say it started going wrong, was when the fundraising started drying up. Always be mistrustful of someone who only thought things were bad when the money started drying up, and it wasn't because of unprincipled things happening. But now we are probably going to be seeing a leadership race where, unfortunately, just based on who is experienced enough, who has enough clout to run, I think that you're going to find that the sort of people running are also going to be more on the left side of the party, because the new right populist section of the BC Conservatives tend to be the new people. It's like on a federal level, Pierre Poilievre is the leader, and he's very likely to remain leader at the National Convention in January. But hypothetically, if he dropped out and they had a new leadership race, I like Jamil Javani, but he is still extremely new, and he probably couldn't run for leader with so many people who still don't know who he is. A lot of people like him, including myself, but he would have to go build up the clout. That's the same problem for many of the more conservative MLAs in the current party, like, Harman Bangu or a Brian Tepper or, Heather Moz or, someone like Macklin McCall. Those four people, if any of them hypothetically ran, they would probably hit a barrier where not that many people outside their own regions know about them. Whereas the people who are well known are your Peter Millibars, it's going to be Eleanor Sturko, it's going to be Bruce Banman, it's going to be the more liberal section of the party that has the name recognition to potentially put together a campaign that can win.
I'm wondering if David Eby, the premier, might try to engineer a snap election now, catching the Conservatives off guard between leaders. Is that a possibility? And how will voters react now, considering what just happened to the party? Those who voted for the Conservatives of the past, I mean, is that support still there to the same degree as it was during the election?
Here's the problem for David Eby. One, I actually just don't think, from having been in BC politics now for not that long, but long enough to kind of size up David Eby, I don't think he has the killer instinct to actually call a snap election. If he did, we wouldn't have had a fall 2024 provincial election. We would have had a spring 2024 provincial election when the Conservatives and BC United were still pretty divided up in the polls. Like, they were almost 50-50 between each other. And so if he actually had political instinct, he would have called that election earlier. He said at a press conference yesterday that British Columbians do not want an election and he's not thinking about having one. Plus, he currently has a majority and he's been, frankly, not doing a great job, but that shouldn't surprise anybody who has seen the NDP operate. There's a lot of broken promises from them. There we have, sawmill closures, ER closures. The education system is not very popular with voters right now. So they would have to be scared that even if they called a snap election right now, how many people in the BC NDP base would even bother showing up at this point when they didn't do the $1,000 grocery rebate they said they were? All the problems are getting worse, and all they seem to be able to do is blame Trump more, with an ascendant Green Party to their left that's being run by a far more aggressive leader right now, Emily Lowen, when in comparison to their leader in the last two elections, Sonia Furstenau.
There's also the nutrient issue as well, which turned out to be a major fiasco for Eby, and the loss of that terminal, which would have been a great economic boost to the province. And of course, there's the ongoing fractious relationship with Alberta over the issue around a pipeline. So there's plenty going on for Eby. So I can see why he would not want to have an election right now, unless, as to your point, maybe he develops a killer instinct. What's going to happen to the future of the Conservative movement in British Columbia? Because people look at BC as being this kind of different province. I mean, most provinces have their Liberal Party and their PC party or something resembling a Conservative party. BC has a very fractured Conservative movement. Of course, you would know that, being with that particular part, BC One. What's the future look like? I mean, will it consolidate behind a Conservative and get ready for the next election, or will it continue to kind of be fractured the way it is?
I probably couldn't exactly comment on if, like, you're going to have a right wing movement that's all going to consolidate together. The problem right now is, again, many of the people in charge of the BC Conservative Party, for instance, are absolutely happy to when Rustad kicked out Dallas Brody, and when people like Tara Armstrong and Jordan Keeley left. They're fine with that. They didn't like them. They don't want to be controversial. I have MLAs texting me, because I know a lot of them, and they're already very wary that the party is moving in a more BC liberal direction once again, because, well, the people who ousted Rustad were actually made up of the people who thought he was too right wing, and that it was a mistake for him to let in Dallas Brody in the first place and whatnot, who, of course, right now is the OneBC leader. The thing is that for BC, the thing I think that people can rest easy on is that it's actually probably becoming a less left wing province, because we've hit the critical mass point where all the policies have so clearly failed that many of the, Victoria and downtown Vancouver will remain NDP, and you'll get some of these pockmarked green areas around. The problem, though, is that there's too many blue collar former NDP trade union voters who just can't stand it anymore. You can't be a sawmill worker and think you can cast another ballot for the NDP. If you live in any of the deprived parts of the province, which is becoming a majority of them, you really can't vote NDP anymore. And then the NDP have the problem of, they've become such a radical party, they've almost kind of tacitly endorsed the Greens, because of what the NDP is doing is great. Why not put it on steroids with the Green Party? And so I think next election you're going to see the Greens end up ripping away some more seats from the NDP, or end up splitting their vote, Whereas I think there's going to be more vote than ever for both the Conservatives and the OneBC party to share.
Wyatt Claypool, how do people find you online?
Well, they can just look up my YouTube channel, The National Telegraph, and I would be amiss to not tell people that they should go check out the OneBC Caucus documentary, Making a Killing, that goes over the Kamloops grave hoax and the reconciliation industry that currently controls the province.
Great work. Thanks for coming on the show, Wyatt.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And that is it for this edition. Appreciate you tuning in, my friends. Let's do it again real soon, shall we? Bye-bye for now.